All right, well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I know we have folks from all across the globe, so it's good morning here on the East Coast of the United States, but I know it might be good afternoon or good evening for some of you. So my name's Hillen Grason. I am one of the Associate Directors of Admission here at Franklin and Marshall College. Thank you for joining us in our final edition of this webinar Wednesday series for Selective College Admission, a case study program. I'm joined by two of my wonderful colleagues here, and I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll start with Adam first.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Kauffman. I'm the Assistant Director of Recruitment at the University of Pittsburgh. I know we're all from across the globe right now, but I grew up just a couple minutes really from Franklin and Marshall. So it's kind of like coming home this morning. Good to be with you all.
And my name is Ulysses De Armas. I am Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in the city of Troy, New York, just about 3 hours north of New York City.
So for those of you who have not been through a case study program before, I'm going to give you a brief outline of what the next hour is going to look like, and then we're going to dive into some numbers for each of our institutions. What we're going to do here in a short while is we're actually going to split out into breakout rooms, and each of our participants will be randomly assigned to one of the three of us, and we're going to walk through 3 separate mock applications and a mock university profile. And what you're going to do is you're actually going to get to see kind of how the sausage is made, how us on the admission side of this process review files, as all of us, if we haven't started already, are about to dive into application review season. It's that time of year, and it's going to give you, the opportunity to see what we put weight on, see how we might consider certain nuances in a student's file, and ask questions about the process. I'm sure some of you, if you haven't already submitted applications, it's definitely top of mind. So without further ado, I want to move into what is selective college admission. So what we've all done is we've put together some statistics on each of our institutions, and we'll start with Franklin and Marshall first here. So each of the last 2 years at Franklin and Marshall, we've received over 9,000 applications for admission. And I know, there's a lot of, demystification that needs to be done around this process. And if you recall all three of us in our titles, right? We all said that we're associate or assistant directors of admission, right? We're not gatekeepers. We're not looking for reasons to deny students. Our goal is to admit the best class for each of our institutions as possible and continue to foster access to a higher education. So when you look at the number of students we've been able to admit at Franklin and Marshall over each of the last 2 years, 2 years ago for the fall 2019 class, we were able to admit right at 30% of our student body. And then for last year's class, given the COVID-19 pandemic, we tried to hedge our bets a little bit, and we admitted a few more students, and that admit rate went up to about 35%. The total students we enrolled that ended up coming to campus 2 years ago and have partially come to campus and enrolled virtually this year, 638 students 2 years ago, 584 students started with us this fall. And of course, due to the pandemic, with all of the chaos that has brought to higher education, we had almost 50 students defer this year. When we talk about selective college admission, it's not just about the numbers, right? It's not just about those statistics. It's also about the process and how we review applications. At Franklin and Marshall, we're fortunate to be able to practice what's called holistic review. If you've heard sessions from other institutions, even Franklin and Marshall, you've probably heard the term before and you've asked yourself, what is holistic admission? What does that even mean? So how we break it down is there's really 2 sides to the review. The first is we look at the quantitative pieces, so your transcripts, your test scores, and your class rank. And you'll see there's some caveats there around test scores and class rank. We are a test optional institution at Franklin Marshall. We have been for quite some time. So if students submit those test scores, we do factor them in. If they don't, we just shift a little bit more of our attention back to that transcripts. Same thing for class rank. It has become increasingly more common year after year that fewer and fewer secondary schools are providing class rankings. And there is a lot of good reason to that. So again, if we have a class rank for a student, we will factor that into their review. but it is not the end all be all. And if they don't have one, again, we shift our attention to other pieces of the review. Then there's what we call the qualitative review, right? We're looking at all of the other things that aren't academic related in terms of what's happening in the classroom or on a test. So your co-curricular involvement, what kinds of clubs and organizations are you partaking in? What kinds of activities? Why something like that matters to us at Franklin and Marshall? The average student here is involved in typically around 4 or 5 different clubs and organizations. So that matters to us when we're looking for students that are going to be potential future diplomats. We look at your essay, right? Your essay is your voice in the application. All of us get very familiar with looking at transcripts. Most of us are recruiting and working with students from the same regions of the globe and the country year after year. So we get very familiar with what those transcripts look like. But the essay is your ability and your opportunity to differentiate yourself in large competitive applicant pools. Interviews, we don't require them at Franklin and Marshall, but we do encourage them. Again, another way for you to make a great connection with somebody from our community and tell us a little bit more about your story. Letters of recommendation, we put some weight on these as well. You know, we like to hear others' perspective of how you are in the community, whether it's in the classroom, in the larger school community, or even in your local community. And we'll get into those a little bit in our case study exercise here in a while. And then talent samples, right? If you're somebody that's really talented in the arts, whether it's music, vocal performance, instrumental, or a number of other areas, you know, those are factors that we'll take into consideration as well. Ulysses?
Yes. So just quickly, in terms of numbers, last year we had over 16,000 applications to Rensselaer. We're a school of about 7,000 undergraduate students and about 1,000 graduate students. We're primarily an undergraduate research university. Generally speaking, our acceptance rate is right around 40% across the board. Anywhere between 39 to 40% is our usual acceptance rate, and we hold pretty true to that year after year after year. Currently, this fall, we have a little over 1,500 students who are matriculated. We have about 100 who have deferred to the spring semester. Most of those are international students. And we have about 40 students who have deferred until next fall, the fall of 2021. And that number is not going to keep us from really reading to the numbers that we want to get this year in terms of a freshman class. Similarly, we do take a holistic review in terms of the application. Because of the type of institution that we are, being more of a STEM or a tech school, the transcript, there are going to be specific things within the transcript that we're going to be looking at. You know, we're going to pay more attention to your math and your science scores or grades. So we want to see 4 years of mathematics, 3 years of science, specifically chemistry and physics. We are test optional this year for the first time. So that's going to be new for us. Class rank and GPA, if your school or if the school calculates a GPA or a rank, we will use them. But it's not a major factor for us at all. Extracurricular or co-curricular activities are certainly things that we want to see. We want to see what type of a contribution you're going to make to our community here in Troy. We have a lot to offer students. We want to know what students are offering the community at large. As Hillen said, your essay is your voice. So tell us something about who you are that we're not going to find out by reading the rest of your application. Rensselaer no longer offers, admissions interviews. So that's out. Letters of recommendation, we really only require one academic letter of recommendation. And because we're only looking for one, we really want that to be from either a science or a math teacher. So that's really important. We don't take talent samples, but there are a few of our programs that do have portfolios that are attached to them, primarily our music major as well as architecture. I'm good.
All right, so I'll go ahead and talk here about Pitt. So our institution is probably going to be, in terms of undergraduate enrollment, it's going to be a little bit bigger than RPI and Franklin and Marshall. We had, over the past 2 years, we've had over 32,000 applicants each of those years. So we do, and these are going to come from all across the country, all across the world. Certainly all across the state of Pennsylvania. Our acceptance rate in general is about 54%. That is going to be for all majors. Now, that can be a little bit deceiving when we look at some of our freshman entry schools that are a little bit more selective, specifically the School of Nursing, our School of Computing and Information, and even the Swanson School of Engineering. So their acceptance rates are going to be a little bit lower than that. And then that depends on certainly what program the student is applying for. So we matriculated about 4,200 students. The previous year, it was a little bit less than that this year, just due to everything with the pandemic. One thing I do want to highlight is, and this kind of piggybacks off of what Ulysses said, is that the number of deferred students that we have is not going to affect the freshmen that are applying this year, or the students that are applying this year in an adverse manner. It's a question that we've commonly got, but it is not something that you would need to worry about if you're a high school senior who's applying to be competing with other seniors and also with the students that deferred from last year. It's not going to be that big of a number that it makes a difference there. So we practice a holistic review as well. And much like RPI, we are in our first year of being test optional with regards to admissions. The only exception to that is going to be the School of Nursing does still require that students submit either an SAT or an ACT score. Other than that, though, a lot of similarities with the previous two institutions in terms of what we're going to be looking for. Performing that holistic review, we can get a lot of good information from a student's high school transcript. So we're going to be able to tell if they've taken certain prerequisite classes that our schools of nursing, business, and engineering would have. We are going to see how they're doing, how their trends are. Are you somebody who's on an upward trend? Are you somebody who's kind of yo-yoing back and forth between some good grades, some not so good grades? So that does tell us a lot. It tells us how you're performing within the context of your high school, whether that be GPA, whether that be class rank. Again, we're encountering a lot of high schools are doing away with class rank. So again, that's not going to be any sort of be all end all. And then it tells us the challenge level of your classes. We're going to see if you're taking honors or AP, IB, college and high school sorts of classes that, again, that's going to tell us how you're challenging yourself, which is something we would look for. Supplemental information. A lot of this information is not required, but it is specifically our short answer questions are very highly encouraged that students participate. That is your way to tell us about all the things that we would not otherwise know about you unless you told us. So a lot of times these activities aren't available on a transcript or any sort of standardized test scores. So don't ever feel like you're bragging when you're telling us about all these additional things that you're doing. If you're applying via the Common App, we're going to see your activities list and things like that. But this is, if you're not applying that way, and it doesn't matter to us which way you apply, that is a great way to sort of weave in your outside the classroom activities. Now it's important to us not just to list those activities, but we want to know what you're getting out of those activities. So, we don't want you to necessarily feel like you have to be in a certain number or the most number of outside the classroom activities. We want to see students that are getting something out of that, and short answer questions or responses are a great place to tell us about those. Letters of recommendation, we will accept those. They're optional, but they're not required. Any sort of personal statement and resumes and activities list. So that kind of rounds out some of the things that we would look for when we're performing our holistic review at Pitt.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for that. I hope that was insightful for everybody. Just a couple more housekeeping items. I'm about to put several PDFs into the chat. The PDFs that I'm about to put into the chat are what we're going to use when we go to our breakout rooms. So what you're going to get is you're going to get one mock university profile. We're also going to send you 3 separate mock applications. So I just wanted to give everybody a quick heads up. Once I send these out, we are then going to go into our breakout rooms. We're going to spend about 25 to 30 minutes in those breakout rooms discussing these. The goal of this exercise is to decide amongst the 3 applicants which one we're going to be able to offer admission to. We're going to need to waitlist one, and then one of the students, unfortunately, we're going to need to cut ties with, and we won't be able to offer them admission or a spot on the waitlist. After we complete this exercise in all of our groups, we're going to come back together as a larger group. All 3 of us will then present the results from our respective breakout rooms, and then we'll leave some time for some question and answer at the end for each of you to pick our brains a little bit more about whether, how our institutions might have viewed these files or certain nuances within the files. So just a quick FYI, if you bear with me for 1 second, I am going to chat these out so you have